I think one of the cornerstones of well-being is the quality of our relationships. We know that the pursuit of money and status is old-fashioned, but relationships matter. But how do you nurture relationships? I think one of the keys to that is the art of empathy, the imaginative step of putting yourself in the shoes of another person and looking at the world through their eyes. It's when you extend outside yourself, that's when you really connect with another person. So there's a real question about how do we practice empathy in everyday life? Well, in your kitchen, you can do it with your family, and that's through empathic listening. That means when you're talking to someone or even in a tense situation, focus on what are they feeling? What do they need? Their feelings and their needs. That's the key to understanding the other person, and it tends to reduce conflict, and there's a lot of hard evidence about this. Because we all know what it's like to be in an argument and you think, oh, I wish they could just see things from my point of view. What you're asking for is empathy, if only for a moment. But we also need to take empathy out of the kitchen and onto the streets, and I think the key to that is through having conversations with strangers. Because we all have prejudices and stereotypes about others, it's by talking to strangers, have a conversation with a stranger at least once a week, that we start breaking down the barriers that divide us. Empathy is something that people often think is just about personal life and personal relationships, but also has a social and political impact. There are fantastic organizations that I've been linked to and involved with, such as the Parents' Circle in Israel and Palestine, which does grassroots empathy campaigning. One of my favorite projects that they do was called the Hello Peace telephone line, where any Israeli could phone up a free phone telephone number on billboards around the country, and they were put through to a Palestinian. They could talk to them about anything for up to half an hour, and Palestinians could call and could speak to an Israeli. In its first 5 years of operation, the Hello Peace phone line logged over 1 million calls. Now just imagine if we had empathy phone lines like that in every country, connecting climate change activists and climate change skeptics, or wealthy bankers and people who've had their homes repossessed. We live in an age of hyper-individualism, where the question, what's in it for me, is the leading question of our age. And we need an antidote to that. And there are really wonderful empathy education programs that we can introduce into schools. We need to pressure governments and local authorities to do that. One of the best known is called The Roots of Empathy, where a baby is brought into the classroom and the kids start talking about the baby. Why is the baby crying? Why is she laughing? What's she thinking and feeling? It's about stepping into someone else's shoes. And if we care about issues such as climate change, we need to educate our children to be able to step into the shoes of others, people who are being hit by the impacts of climate change now in developing countries and future generations as well. We need to change our minds so we can imagine what's it like to be a teenager growing up in Dublin or Dubai in 2100. I think that's the only way that we're really going to create the kind of worldview shift that we need to tackle the global ecological crisis. I think we need to practice empathy in our personal lives, but also we need new cultural institutions. And that's why I'm in the process of inventing the world's first empathy museum, a traveling adventure space where you can step into the shoes of other people. So what might you find there? You might find, for instance, a human library bus, where you go along and instead of borrowing a book, you borrow a person for conversation. So you can sit down and talk to maybe a Sikh teenager, or a gay father, or a climate change activist, and try and have a conversation which helps you step into the shoes of others. You might go into another room at the Empathy Museum and there's a cell phone assembly line where you find out what's it like to be a sweatshop worker. What are the real realities of that? Then you walk into a cafe in the dark and you get a sense of what it might be like to be visually impaired. And the Empathy Museum is going to be opening in cities around the world, but also online as well.